What is up, everyone? PAROX here, and today I'm going to be talking about ammo. Too many times I see new players shooting all HE or all premium rounds in game, so I'm going to talk about the different types of ammo and when is the best time to use them. So there are a total of 6 different types of ammo, and some of the characteristics of these ammo can be pretty confusing, so I'm going to try to explain it in the least confusing way with the most generic terms that I possibly can. So first, the basic type of ammo is the AP shell, armor piercing. So this is the shell that you'll see most often in the game. It costs credits mostly. You can shoot it on like the S-51 and some of the other Soviet artillery for premium rounds. Not premium rounds, sorry. For gold. It is a premium round on those tanks. The default is AG. But anyway, this shell will lose penetration over distance. So if you shoot something 300 meters away, the penetration value that is shown on that round is going to be less when it actually gets to that tank. And also there's a thing called normalization, and basically this means with AP rounds there's a 5-degree normalization. So if the armor is tilted at 30 degrees, let's say, the shell is going to hit it and as if it were 25 degrees, and that's with the AP ammo. It's a little different with APCR, but basically that's all you really need to know about shell normalization. Alright, so the next shell I'm going to talk about is the HE shell, high explosive. This is the shell that I see misused more often than any other shell in the game. In the garage, when you go over HE, you can see that it has the most damage. So why not use it, right? It has, say, like 20% or something like that more damage than the AP shell does, so duh, that's the obvious choice, right? Wrong. What the HE shell does is, well, it's in the name, it's high explosive. When you shoot it at a tank, if it can't penetrate the armor, it explodes. And more times than not, it doesn't penetrate the armor because HE has a very low penetration value. So what you want to do with the HE shells is I usually keep a few HE in my higher tier tanks, because lower tier tanks, the caliber of the gun is so small that the explosion from the HE shell, that's like 30 millimeters in diameter, isn't really going to do anything. So I usually stick to all AP on lower tiers, but in higher tiers, you keep a few HE shells for a couple of reasons. One is to reset the cap if you can't penetrate for sure what's in there. So for example, if I am playing an IS-6 and there is a T95 capping my base, and I have the front of his armor, I am no way going to be able to penetrate him with AP or APCR. So what I would do in that situation is load an HE shell, shoot it at the little box above the T95 tracks, and track him, because when you track tanks, that also counts as a cap reset. Another thing you can use HE for is shooting tanks on very low HP. So for example, in this video, or this replay that's rolling up, there is a Jagdtiger 88 that's hull down on 42 HP. No way I'm going to be able to pen the superstructure of that tank, so I'm just going to load an HE shell, shoot him. I know it's not going to penetrate, but it is going to explode, and hopefully that is enough to do 42 HP of damage. Okay, so that was the shells that you can buy mostly for credits in the game. So now we're going to move on to the premium types of shells. There is a premium HE. It's probably the rarest shell. Actually, it's not. The HESH shell only is in like 6 tanks. But anyway, the premium HE shell, basically all it is a high explosive shell that has a bigger splash radius. So it's easier for artillery to hit stuff, pretty much. So now I'm going to move on to the HESH shell, the high explosive squash head. High explosive is also in the name again, so it does explode. And this type of ammo is probably one of the most fussy ammos in the game. If it doesn't penetrate, it'll explode on the surface and do minimal damage, but if it does, it's going to do a crap ton. For example, on the 183 Tier 10 British TD, if it penetrates, it can do like 1900 damage a shot, but if it doesn't, and you're shooting like an E100, it's probably gonna only do 300. This shell has again, the same characteristics as high explosives, but the penetration is very high on it. Alright, so now it's time to talk about the two most common premium ammos in the game. That's APCR, Armor Piercing Composite Rigid, and HEAT, High Explosive Anti-Tank Ammo. So the APCR shells have the fastest velocity in the game. They come out of the gun and can travel very high speeds, so you don't really need to lead your shells as much, so you don't need to aim in front of the tank as far as you would AP ammo. It's not that big of a difference, but it does make some difference in your aiming. Also, there is a normalization with APCR, but it's only 2 degrees. So if you had a 30-degree piece of armor, it would be like the shell's hitting 28 degrees of armor. And also, it has the highest penetration of any shell in the game. So this premium ammo is one of the best in the game, I think, besides the fact that it can also lose penetration over distance, and that's kind of the downside of it. Oh, I forgot to mention this. The APCR shells lose more penetration over a distance than AP does at the same distance. So if you're shooting targets far away that you might be able to penetrate with APCR, you're probably not going to be able to penetrate them with APCR just because it'll lose more penetration over distance. But tanks that default to have armor piercing composite rigid, such as the T-71 has a gun that has APCR as the default ammo, and same with some of the tier 10 medium tanks. Those shells, the regular APCR shells, don't lose as much penetration over distance as if it were premium in another tank. So just keep that in mind. And the final ammo type is heat. Now heat is probably the second fussy ammo in the game, the first being the HESH shell that I talked about earlier. So heat ammo doesn't lose penetration over distance, so that's a good thing. So if there's a tank that's very far away and you shoot heat ammo, you will have the same penetration when the shell gets there as when it left your gun. But there are a lot of downsides to heat ammo. For instance, it doesn't have normalization, so it doesn't like sloped armor. It doesn't like spaced armor. So basically you have to shoot at very flat parts of the tank if you want heat ammo to work reliably. I often find myself having a lot more troubles with heat than I would if I have just loaded an AP clip. Now there are a few age-old questions such as AP versus HE and APCR versus heat. AP usually default over HE except when you want to reset a cap or just splash someone with AG to death if you can't penetrate their armor. And APCR versus heat, I would definitely have to go with APCR. Even though it loses penetration over distance, it has a high velocity, and it isn't fussy, so it can take on sloped armor and spaced armor much more effectively than heat can. But there are some better times to use heat, such as when you can't penetrate flat parts of the armor. So I like to use heat on E100s and mouses because their turrets are flat, and you can get through the front of the mouse and the E100's turret with high tier heat ammo. So that's one of the pluses to using heat over APCR. And also there's one last very important mechanic called overmatching. This happens when the gun that is shooting a tank's armor, the penetration value of that gun is 3 times greater than the armor. It'll penetrate no matter what the angle is. So for example, the rear of the IS-3 has 60 millimeters of armor thickness. Times 3, that's 180 millimeters. And if I shoot that with the T-57 Heavy's gun, which has 258 millimeters, 258 is greater than 180 last time I checked. So that should go penetrate the IS-3's armor without without bouncing, no matter what the angle's at. I hope you learned some things about the different ammo types and their characteristics, when the best time to shoot them is. So if you've enjoyed, I'd really appreciate it if you left a like and subscribed. I'll see you next time.